The perimeter line had not been crossed in 40 years, not once. Not by accident, not by a drunk cargo hauler drifting off course, not by a scared recruit who forgot which way was home. 40 years held by a treaty nobody liked and everybody kept. Today it was crossed by 17 ships, moving in a formation built to end an argument, not start one. Commodore Mara Okafor stood on the observation deck of Meridian Station and watched the dots crawl across the tactical display, and she did the one thing nobody in that room expected. She smiled. She was 61 years old, and the years did not sit on her like weight. They sat on her like proof. She wore her father's old field compass on a cord under her collar, the needle long dead, frozen pointing at a home that did not exist anymore. She never fixed it. People who knew her well enough to ask always got the same answer. It still points where it needs to. The Skarn Dominion had been testing the line for 6 months. Feints, sensor sweeps, a supply convoy that got lost 11 kilometers, passed the boundary and then apologized, with the particular smugness of someone who is not sorry at all. Everyone on the Conquered Council had called it posturing. Mara had called it homework. She just never said what she thought they were studying for. The reactor core buried under Meridian's North Ridge was rated for a city 10 times the size of the one sitting on top of it. Nobody outside a very short list had ever asked why. It had been that way for 40 years. Nobody questioned old things that worked. 6 hours before the 17 ships crossed the line, Meridian Station had run its evening shift the way it always did. Cargo crews loading grain shuttles bound for the outer settlements. A school group touring the reactor's public levels, kept well away from anything that mattered. A market square smelling of fried dough and recycled air. Nobody there knew the number that mattered most that day, which was this: the Skarn fleet had been sitting 7 light minutes off the line for 11 hours. Engines cold, running silent, waiting for a window nobody on Meridian had been told to expect. Mara had known for 4 of those 11 hours. She had not told the school group to go home. She had not evacuated the market square. She had sat in her quarters with a cup of tea going cold beside her, doing the kind of math that has no good answer, only a less bad one, and had made the decision that the fastest way to lose everyone on that station was to let them see her, afraid before there was anything to be afraid of yet. Before we go any further, if you're the kind of person who stays until the end of a story like this one, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to Humanity Revenge HFY. This is exactly the kind of story this channel exists to tell. Now back to the ridge and the ships coming in low over it. Fleet Marshal Threnn did not consider himself a cruel man. He considered himself a precise one. The Skarn Dominion did not go to war for glory. It went to war for arithmetic, and the arithmetic on Meridian Station had bothered him for years. A human colony sitting on a resource corridor, defended by treaty instead of firepower, protected by a ban the humans themselves had agreed to. It offended his sense of order. Rules that only bind one side are not rules. They are leashes. His scouts told him the colony's shields would fold in under 6 minutes. His intelligence told him the humans had no fleet within range, no weapon they were permitted to use, and no history of breaking their word even when breaking it would save them. That last part was the detail that should have worried him. It did not. Not yet. Threnn had studied humans for 11 years. He had read their treaties, their war logs, the sealed testimony from the last conflict that had ended their side of the war in 11 minutes and never been fully explained to anyone outside their own command structure. He had built his entire strategy on one conclusion. Whatever had ended that war, humanity had promised never to use it again, and humans, whatever else they were, kept their promises in writing. He trusted the paper. He had never once asked himself what humans did with the years after they signed, something they did not intend to need again. There was a second problem underneath the first one, smaller, and he had buried it the way disciplined men bury small problems. His own fleet doctors had flagged, months earlier, a pattern in Meridian's public power grid, consumption numbers that rose and fell in a rhythm no civilian colony should have. He had ordered the analysis filed and not distributed further. It did not fit the picture he needed the picture to be, So he had decided it did not fit reality either. He gave the order to fire on the outer med station first. Not because it was strategic, because it would end the argument before it started. Humans, his analyst had told him, do not think clearly when their wounded are burning. The first strike hit at 0347 station time. It did not hit the med station. It hit 11 meters short into open rock, because someone on that med station had spent 4 years quietly, illegally, adjusting its listed coordinates by a distance, too small for any scan to flag and too large to matter, until today. A junior engineer named Priya Batra had made that change without telling anyone, logged it as a routine calibration, and gone back to her tea. She never told anyone why she did it. She just had a feeling, the kind career officers get and never write in reports. Ensign Devon Cole was on comms when the alert came through, and instead of freezing, he did the thing he always did when the numbers turned bad. He started humming. Nobody ever figured out what the song was. He didn't know either. The conquered observer on station, a diplomat named Liu Wen who had not said a full sentence in 3 days, stood very still by the window and watched the strike bloom. Against the shields, like a bruise spreading under skin. Threnn Doves watched his own sensors and frowned. The reactor under the North Ridge had just spiked, not toward the shields, downward, into the ground. That should not have been possible, and it should have worried him more than it did. The second wave was already forming before the first had finished failing. That was the shape of every crisis Mara had ever lived. Through nothing on this job ever waited politely for the last problem to finish before starting the next one. Shield integrity on the residential ring dropped to 40%. A cargo hauler still on approach from the outer settlements radioed in, caught between the fleet and the station, its pilot's voice cracking once before he steadied it and asked, simply for instructions. Devon Cole gave him a heading. In a voice so calm the pilot later said it was the only reason he didn't panic and fly straight into the debris field. Mara. Okafor pulled a sealed drive from a locked drawer she had not opened in 11 years. Written on its casing in a hand that was not hers was a single phrase that meant nothing to anyone in that room except her. The Kessler Clause. Nobody had explained the Kessler Clause to the crew. Nobody had explained it to the council either. Not fully, not the part that mattered. It had been buried in the original ban, page 400 and something, written by lawyers who assumed it would never matter. It said, in language dense enough that 3 generations of diplomats had skimmed past it, the prohibition holds until the enemy commits the first act against protected medical infrastructure. After that, the prohibition transfers. It does not disappear. It transfers. For 40 years, humanity had been banned from using what the Council called, in hushed rooms, the Lazarus Directive. Not a bomb, not a fleet. A method, a way of turning a planet's own crust into a weapon so total that the treaty framers had decided no species should ever be trusted with it twice. Humanity had used it once in the last war and ended that war in 11 minutes. Then humanity had agreed, publicly, gratefully, to never use it again. What humanity had not agreed to stop doing was building the trigger deeper into every colony reactor it ever constructed afterward, waiting, quietly, for someone else to break the rule first. Mara had known about the Ridge reactor since she was 31 years old. Fresh off officer training, when an old colonel with shaking hands had shown her the schematics and said the words that had lived in her chest ever since. We are not allowed to start it. We are only allowed to finish it. That was the wrong reaction everyone in that observation deck remembered years later. Not her fear, her relief. Threnn's second wave came in tighter, angrier, aimed now at the colony proper instead of the med station his first strike had missed. He did not know yet that missing had cost him more than hitting would have. His sensors kept flagging that reactor spike, and something in the pattern of it, the shape of the power curve, made his hands go still on the console for exactly 1 second. A soldier beside him noticed. He did not explain it. He told himself it was nothing. It was not nothing. It was doubt, and doubt was the one weapon nobody on his side had trained him to recognize when it was aimed at himself. Lewin finally spoke. 3 days of silence, and what came out was 3 words, said quietly to no one in particular. The way people say things they have been carrying so long they forget the weight has a voice. Then let them. Nobody asked her to clarify. Mara had already turned the key. The ground beneath Meridian's north ridge did not explode. That was the detail people who survived it kept trying to describe and kept failing to. Explosions are loud and fast and over. This was slow and total and quiet in a way that felt worse than noise. The rock itself seemed to exhale. Once and where? Skarn's third wave had been holding formation 400 kilometers up. There was simply less sky to hold anything in. It did not look like a weapon. It looked like the world deciding calmly that it had had enough. Threnn Doves lost 11 ships. In the time it took him to finish one, sentenced to his second officer. He never finished the sentence. He sat in his command chair afterward and did the thing his own analysts had said humans do when they cannot process a number. He said nothing at all. Ensign Cole stopped humming. In the sudden quiet, everyone on the observation deck heard it, the absence of the song more than the sound of it, and understood, without anyone saying it aloud, that something in the room had changed shape permanently. There was a full minute after the ridge went still where nobody moved. Mara stood with her hand still resting on the console, not gripping it anymore, just resting. The way you rest a hand on something after you have finally set it down. Priya Batra sat at her station and looked at the floor instead of her monitors. Lewin closed her eyes. Davin Cole poured the tea he had made 3 hours earlier. Found it cold and made more anyway, because it was something to do with his hands, and hands need something to do after a moment like that. Nobody cheered. This is the part most stories about humanity like to skip, and it is the part that matters most. 140 Skarn crew did not come home from that ridge, and every person on that station who understood what had just happened carried that number, quietly for the rest of their lives. Victory that costs nothing was never the kind humans were good at. It had just never once stopped them from winning anyway. Before I close this one out, if this story stayed with you, drop a comment and tell me the moment that hit hardest for you. And if you know somebody who needs reminding what people are actually capable of when they've been patient long enough, send this one their way. Humanity Revenge. HFY grows one story at a time, and it's viewers like you telling other people about it that keeps this channel alive. Now, here's how it ended. Threnn Doves sent a single message to Meridian Station before he withdrew what remained of his fleet. It was short, and it was not an apology because men like him did not apologize. It read, "We did not know the line still had teeth." Mara read it twice, then filed it, unanswered, in the same drawer where the sealed drive had sat for 11 years. Some messages did not need a reply. The silence was the reply. Lewin found Mara on the observation deck 2 days later, standing in the same spot, looking at the same window. She did not say much. She rarely did, and this was, everyone agreed afterward, exactly the quality that made the few things she said land the way they did. "They will write treaties about this," Lewin said. "New clauses. New pages." "They usually do," Mara said. "Will it matter?" Mara didn't answer for a while. She touched the compass under her collar, the one with the needle that had not moved in decades, still pointing somewhere that had nothing to do with north. "It never has before," she said. "We just keep building the next one anyway." Below the ridge, the ground had already begun to settle, the way it always did after something enormous had finished happening beneath it. Ensign Davin Cole was back at his station, humming something nobody could name, and Priya Batra was quietly adjusting another set of coordinates nobody would ever ask her about. And the reactor under the North Ridge was already, silently, rebuilding the charge it had spent, the way it had for 40 years before this one, waiting for a rule nobody hoped would ever need to transfer again. The needle on Mara's compass had not moved in 11 years. It still pointed where it needed to,